Finally, after 2 earthquakes and a bunch of internet downtime, I'm able to give you guys my next build. I was able to clear pit 100 with this using my forehead to play, and I was able to clear pit 119 with time to spare. You'll be ridiculously tanky, absurdly fast, and deal plenty of damage while pulling in enemies as you go. Not only that, but it's very easy to hit all of your defensive resistances and armor in this build, and I'll even give you alternative options if you have less gear. Now I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about this build, but first like, comment, and subscribe, and join our community Discord at discord.gg/screamheart. Now let's get into it. So first I'm going to walk you through the basics of how the build works. So at the end of the day, all we really are doing is holding down shred to attack. But because we've got this set up in a certain way, holding down shred is going to create a bunch of other things happening at the same time. And we'll be maintaining Grizzly Rage for the entire duration, which means that our other skills are not even accessible. But that's fine because we're using Chaos perks in order to activate them. So we've got Wild Transformations, and this is going to trigger our Blood Howl, and that's going to give us a 20% damage increase and another 25% damage increase. But because we're in Grizzly Rage, normally that would mean that we're maintaining that form for the duration. However, there is one trick to get around that. So we're also going to be activating our human form, which will give us the trigger of Cyclone Armor and pull enemies in. And we're doing that with our rune, which is the Q rune. This will trigger constantly as we're spending resources. That means that not only do we have a huge defensive barrier, which I'll give you an example by activating it manually, you can see that we're getting a 30,000 barrier on top of our already 40,000 life. And this can be even bigger if you were to change your attack speed over to Iron Feather. Now you can see that we're at 53,000 life, and if we activate it, it's 38,000 barrier. So you can be as tanky as you want to be in this build. And that barrier is constantly reapplying, which just makes it an insane defensive layer. On top of that, we've got our other Spirit Boon Masochistic, which is constantly healing us. So you literally will not die. You can stand in a puddle of damage and never take any actual damage. But back to the Chaos perks. We're using Purge the Infected in order to get guaranteed critical strikes. This is also applying Poison, which is helpful for activating some utility, but it's spending Spirit, which is allowing our Q rune to activate more often. We're using Overabundance for a 300% damage increase, and we're using Brawn over Brains because we're leaning into overpower damage here. Now I did set up the build around overpower damage, so that's something to keep in mind. But if for whatever reason, let's say you didn't have the Zon rune. The Zon rune here is how we're activating most of our overpower. We're also technically getting some from Banished Lord's Talisman, but for the most part, it's going to be the Zon rune. So let's say you didn't have the Zon rune. In that case, you could go for a Beast Cornered, and you can swap out Banished Lord's Talisman for a different damage item. Then you would just change anything in the build that gives overpower damage, such as the gems on the weapons, and you could run that way as well. So just to be clear, this is probably the most casual friendly build you're possibly going to have. And it's one of the better speed farming builds, so it's great for anyone. So all we have to do is activate our Grizzly Rage, and then we start shredding, and you can shred constantly. You'll never run out of spirit, and you should never have your Grizzly Rage ultimate run off. And you'll see when I get into the gear that I don't even actually have any of the tempers that can help with the Grizzly Rage duration or cooldown reduction on any of my items. So you can definitely make it even better uptime. It's also important to note that I cleared the 119 pit without proper masterworking and without even fully masterworking all my items. So you can see here my Fists of Fate has terrible affixes on it. So I haven't even actually bothered masterworking it. So we're missing a ton of lucky hit chance, which means more survivability, and we're missing some raw attack speed. And the same goes for most of my other items. My Air of Perdition has a bonus into critical strike chance, which we don't even benefit from. My gloves have bonuses into 2 things that we're not benefiting from. I have no useful bonuses in my pants. My Banished Lord's Talisman is not ideal. We're missing a very important bonus into our double damage for shred, and the same thing for our other item. I have all the wrong bonuses in this ring, the wrong bonuses in this ring, and the only item we actually have properly masterworked is our amulet. But again, this amulet was bricked, so I have 2 useless tempers. So since the build's pretty straightforward, let me just get into the gear right away. We're using Air of Perdition on our helmet for a 60% damage multiplier, as well as the ranks to core skills, but you can totally swap this item out with no issues. So for example, the Malefic Crescent could go on the helmet, and then in your chest piece, you could use Shroud. If you don't have Shroud, you could easily use Mad Wolf's Glee. Malefic Crescent is a huge damage increase on this build, because we're using the Keystone passive that goes along with it, Lupine Ferocity. So this increases the damage from Lupine Ferocity by 240%, so it's a pretty important item. Not to mention the ranks to Feral Aptitude and the willpower on it are extremely nice. In order to stay in our ultimate, we have to use Direwolf's Aspect, so this one's unfortunately required, even though it takes up a damage slot. It does, however, reduce our spirit costs and give us movement speed, which means that we're not going to have spirit issues, despite how much spirit we use, and it allows us to just keep moving quickly. We're choosing this item to put it on so we can get the ranks to shred, and that counters a little bit of the fact that we're losing damage. We're going with Fist of Fate because it's an 80% damage multiplier. But technically, if you can manage the Spirit, I think actually Lucian's is a little bit better here. For our boots, we're doing the Banished Lord's Talisman. This one's giving us that extra overpower I talked about whenever we spend Spirit, and it synergizes nicely with the fact that we're spending a lot of Spirit. But this is also giving us ranks to core skills and a fat multiplier to our maximum life. On our one-handed weapon, we're going with Blurred Beast aspect, and this one is why it looks like we attack so quickly. We don't actually attack that quickly, but we're getting our attacks multiplied basically. And like I said, those tempers to shred dealing double damage are very important, which you're also putting onto your offhand. And here we're running Rampaging Werebeast. This one's just giving us 100% more damage and extending the duration of our ultimate, so just a great aspect overall. On our first ring, we're running Unsatiated. This paired with Energize is going to help keep our spirit up despite how much we spend. In fact, going back to the Fists of Fate, I do think that running Crown of Lucian here might be the play. I don't see myself having spirit issues. I'm gonna go test that real quick right after I record this, and I'll let you know before I end the video. So I just got done testing what I was talking about, and here you can see that I went for an Air of Perdition removed setup where I've got Fists of Fate and Crown of Lucian. This is a nice alternative to the Mythic option, because as you can see, I was able to clear a pit 119, and it was no problem. I had 5 minutes to spare. This one's actually a bit nicer defensively because you have better procs for your Pock rune. So I was able to get more procs, which means I swapped my Zon over to be with Pock to give better overpowers, and then I moved my Q over with my Moni in order to get better procs for my Earthen Bulwark. So overall, more defensive. I think maybe slightly higher damage. I'd have to do more testing to be able to figure out exactly where that's at. But as you can see, there are options for this build. For our other ring, we're going with Aspect of the Rabid Bear, and this one's nice for a couple of reasons. It's giving us an 80% damage multiplier, but it's also converting our damage over to poison damage, which means that we can actually utilize a bonus like Toxic Claws, and this is a huge damage multiplier. We're talking about a 70% increase. Then finally, for our amulet, we're going with Storm Claws aspect, and this one is nice because it creates a small lightning AoE, and it's going to be equal to 90% of the damage we deal, but this is also going to get additional multipliers, such as the damage from Electric Shock in our passive tree. For the Spirit Boons, I recommend going with Wariness, although you can go for Gift of the Stag if you don't feel like you need the survivability, which you probably don't. So I would at least start with Gift of the Stag and see how it feels, and then change over to Wariness if you feel a little squishy. I'm recommending Iron Feather as a default, but swooping attacks will increase your DPS, and you don't really need the extra survivability from Iron Feather. So feel this one out and choose the one that's better for you. We're going with Avian Wrath, Energize to make sure we've got that extra spirit, and then we're taking Masochistic for survivability. You should definitely not need it, but you do have the option of running Calm Before the Storm. And yes, Calm Before the Storm is triggered by our Storm Claws aspect, but it's very unlikely that you'll actually need this to maintain your ultimate. I already covered the runes, but just to be safe, we're using Pock Q, so spending resource to trigger our Earthen Bulwark, and Moni Zon, which is basically giving us overpower based off of using a mobility skill, which our Shred is. And we're using this extremely quickly, so this will also proc extremely quickly. For our elixirs and our incense, we're using Elixir of Advantage for attack speed and lucky hit chance, but if you need the survivability, you can use Elixir of Fortitude. And we have a lot of attack speed in the build, so it's possible you'll cap out before you actually use this. So if you do, you can just use this by default. For the incense, we're going with Blessed Guide for the willpower, Redamine Buzz for the max life, and Soothing Spices for the all resist and the armor. Now it's pretty likely that you won't even really need these that much. We cap out extremely easily because we're using the Brawn over Brains, and this lowers our maximum resistances, as well as our max armor. So you only need about 50% for your resistances, and for your armor, I think it's something like 750. Keep in mind that you get armor when you activate your Grisly Rage, and I don't even have Incense on right now, so we have way more armor and resistances than we need. In fact, I should probably change my Rahir because I'm not actually benefiting from the 15% all resist that he's giving, so I'd probably change him over to Subo, but Mercenaries are not that important. I get a little bit of attack speed from Variana, but again, not necessary. For a skill tree, normally I'd take 2 points in Maul to activate my quick shift bonuses before going in my Grisly Rage, but because our runes are constantly triggering our Earthen Bulwark, that means that we're getting quick shift by default. We're maxing out Wild Impulses for damage, maxing out Shred, and going to Primal Shred so that we can make sure we dash constantly and do as much damage as possible. We're maxing out Digigrade to get as much movement speed as possible, although you likely won't even need these points there, but there's not that much that you can get for Shred, so you're gonna have points to spare. We're maxing out Earthen Bulwark and going to Preserving for the Fortify, maxing out Cyclone Armor for more passive damage reduction, and getting Preserving so we can pull enemies in. This also reduces enemy damage. We're getting Innate Bloodhowl for that 25% damage. We're maxing out Backlash for damage and maxing out Vigilance for damage reduction. We're maxing out Feral Aptitude for more damage, Electric Shock for more damage, and the same goes for Toxic Claws and Envenom. These are some of the biggest damage that you can possibly get. We're maxing out our Grisly Rage and going for the 2 additional points. You probably don't need the 4 points here because we're fine on both the cooldown and we don't really need that armor. So you could pull these out if you have somewhere else you want to put them, but there's not really anywhere to put them. We're maxing out defensive posture for more damage reduction. And then for our keystone passive, we're going with Lupine Ferocity. And you can see that we're getting 315%, which is a massive multiplier. For the Paragon boards, we're going with Keeper on the first board. And apparently the Pit 100 and 119 that I cleared for this video, I didn't even have my 15% damage bonus. So that's just even more damage that the build has. Moving up from there, we're putting on our Heightened Malice board. And here we're going with the Spirit Glyph. We're going to take a quick detour to the left and we're going to attach the Ancestral Guidance board. And here we're going with Headhunter. Then back across to the right, we're going to attach our Lust for Carnage board. And here we're going with the Dominate Glyph. Keep in mind that if you decide to run the non-overpower version, you definitely need to change this particular glyph. And as an honorable mention, if you ran the Poise Glyph, which I've basically never done in this game, but if you ran it, you have a 30% chance when you're shapeshifting to gain another barrier that absorbs 15% of your max life. And because you're shapeshifting constantly as you're activating that bulwark, that means that you would basically be immortal. Just food for thought. And finally, for the last board, we're attaching the Inner Beast board, but we're not actually taking the legendary node here. It doesn't really benefit us in any way, but Shred has limited options, so this is the board. And here we're going with the Fang and Claw glyph. Keep in mind, if you don't have as many Paragon points as I have, I'm going to include a mid-game guide in the written guide, and that will have less Paragon points spent and also has some alternate swap items that you can use instead of the ones I have. And that should be everything. I hope you guys enjoy this build. It's a really casual, friendly, easy and fun build to play. It's extremely fast, so I'm sure you guys will like it. Plus the added bonus of never being able to die is quite nice. Make sure you guys leave a comment below and let me know what builds you still want to see this season. And drop me a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Now that I've had an internet guy out to hopefully fix my problems, I am going to attempt to stream here in the future. And my hope and my goal is that I can actually be consistent with it without any technical issues. So we'll see how that pans out. But either way, drop me a follow at twitch.tv/screamheart, and I hope to see you guys there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Daddy Druid out.
Subscribe to Screamheart. He's more than an old fart. He makes lots of fun builds. I promise his streams chill. He should probably be faster. Come watch this disaster.